this conversation with Randy Cohen. I'm Jason Mancini, Executive Director of Connecticut Humanities. It's good to see so many of you and some familiar faces and some folks from our broader humanities community. The work we've been doing at Connecticut Humanities over the last several years around investing in our cultural sector and really sort of shaping and strengthening and creating an ecosystem that is more sustainable for our cultural organizations is something that has been at the top of our list over the last several years. And then growing out of the Connecticut Cultural Fund with our investment, the State Office of the Arts, and working with various collaborators, we've sought to sustain higher levels of investment from the state of Connecticut. And while we've had varying levels of success in doing so, I think a really important part of this is the advocacy work we all need to demonstrate. And so that's why we're here today. Part of the work that I've been doing behind the scenes of late has been in partnership with our colleagues and friends in the arts organizations, tourism, restaurants, lodging. We all have sort of overlapping and intersecting interests in these kinds of investments that affect all of us in different but important ways. And so we've started a conversation with the state of Connecticut Department of Economic and Community Development. We've secured a lot of support from DECD and the commissioner at DECD, and looking for the first time in many years to get into the governor's budget with some more significant investments in arts, humanities, and tourism before we go through a legislative process. So this is an opportunity right now to get a nod from the governor and his administration before we really launch into some major advocacy in the spring. And in doing so, what we're looking to do is work with the cultural organizations that we fund to learn how to better advocate for themselves, for their communities, and the work that we all do. And to do that, we need to tell stories. And as humanities organizations and arts organizations, we're really good at that. But sometimes we also need to think about ourselves as businesses and how do we run a smart, effective business organization and making sense of the economic impact, the educational impact, and the social impact. And so we're starting off the series of 3 conversations with economic impacts and inviting Randy Cohen into this conversation as he has done some really remarkable work in this arena. And I'll just make a quick introduction to Randy and hand it over to him. So Randy is the Vice President of Research at Americans for the Arts, the national advocacy organization for arts, where he's been empowering arts advocates since 1991. He's known for balancing rigorous research methods with accessible and actionable results. His work at Americans for the Arts has provided new perspectives for nonprofit arts. And I will say, given our ongoing collaboration with the state arts agency, this is particularly relevant to us. We sometimes don't capture humanities in the same breath as we do the arts, but we really see in Connecticut, and I know some of my counterparts across the country are starting to see the importance of thinking about these, this work, our collaborative work on behalf of our publics in important ways. So Randy recently published Arts and Economic Prosperity 6, the economic impact of nonprofit arts and cultural organizations and their audiences, and also Americans Speak Out About the Arts in 2023 National Public Opinion Study about the arts. Randy, thanks so much for being here with us and edifying us in this conversation. And I know we have some folks here that are going to have lots of questions, and I turn it to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Well, it's great to be with everyone and good to sort of be back in Connecticut. Actually spent a lot of time out there. My folks are in Brookfield. So it's always kind of like, coming home week whenever I am with you all. And this the state's had me up a couple times in recent years to sort of you know do these cross the state tours, talking to arts and culture and humanities organizations. And I'm glad you called that out, because I actually went and checked the website. It's just sort of this like federal top down thing where we got to like chop and mince everything into these like separate diverse buckets, but obviously there's huge overlap. So when I talk about arts and culture and humanities, I mean, I live in Montgomery County, Maryland, where I'm served by the Arts and Humanities Council of Montgomery, Maryland, Montgomery County. So just know, even though I may slip into arts maybe a couple times more than I should, we really look at the big umbrella of arts and culture and humanities. And um so it's great to be with you all, and I love that we're getting this early jump on advocacy. So I tell you, more often than not, I get like, can you do a webinar Thursday because the hearing's Friday and we want to get everyone ready? It's like, absolutely, but boy, wouldn't it be next year? Like, let's do it 4, 5, 6 months in advance and get everybody, because it's about building the habit of advocacy. And we're going to talk about some advocacy towards the end. So, but you said it just right. It's really about changing the conversation. Everybody appreciates arts and culture and humanities. It's part of our humanity. Literally, it's right there in the word, right? And who we are, and how they create more livable communities, and they make us feeling creative and inspired. And but you're also absolutely right. We're businesses. We're an industry, and we support jobs and we generate government revenue. We're good for the other businesses around us, and that's a story that also has to be told. So yeah, thank you for the very kind introduction. So arts and economic prosperity, and let's see, I think I'm pointing the right way on. There it is. We've got this great backdrop. We're going to be talking about this study looking at the economic and social impact of arts and culture organizations. In our communities, in our states, and in the country. I'll mention right out of the gate that here it is, we're sort of last quarter of 2024. And the data we're going to be talking about today are from 2022. And we all remember what was happening that year, not to mention the 2 years before it, that whole pandemic thing, which was just so devastating to our industry. And it's interesting now as the research starts to come out, and it's like, oh my gosh, it was devastating, and it feels still feels hard in a lot of ways, and the data backs that up as well. But just to give you some ideas, I always say, our arts and culture organizations, first to close, last to reopen. 99% of our organizations had to cancel events and programming, suspend operations. Some closed, many of those never reopened. Johns Hopkins University, they track employment at all nonprofits in the United States. There's like 1.6 million nonprofit organizations out there. Then maybe about 110, 120,000 of them are arts and culture organizations. The arts and culture nonprofits lost jobs at 5 times the rate of all nonprofits. And they've been slower than everybody else to bring the jobs back. And, obviously everybody's pretty much open now, but as I travel around, I still, talk to folks and like, yeah, we're still trying to get our jobs back to, we got the programming back, but we haven't brought all the jobs back to do the work. So if everyone's feeling tired, that might be some of it. Um, and then the Bureau of Economic Analysis when they finally did their big study looking at the impact of the pandemic on the nation's economy. And, we all heard about tourism and we heard about lodging and airlines, but they called out arts and culture, specifically the performing arts, as among the most devastated industries. Not every industry, not every, I should say, arrow, though, was pointing downward during the pandemic. And there was one that was going crazy upward, which I think really leads to some of the conversation about the centrality of arts and culture to our lives. And that was personal creation in the arts. Um, we do a big national public opinion survey every couple years. And I'm about to publish one here in a couple of weeks. But um, one of the findings that we had that we actually reported on in the economic impact study was we asked people about their actions and activities during the pandemic. 37% of the American public said, yeah, I tried some kind of new arts, crafts, culture, culinary, gardening, some kind of creative, expressive activity during the pandemic. One third of the population. Um, Amazon was writing these articles about this mysterious spike in ukulele sales, and of course now the industry data starts to show us that like, wow, there was 300% growth in ukulele sales. Um, you know, how many loaves of sourdough bread were left on our doorstep? Those couple years, right? I ate all of them. Um, so I so even though many of our events and cultural opportunities were unavailable, people found a way to start to make it part of their own life. And interestingly, we were part of a big international research study with University College London, University of Florida. We're part of the Epi Arts Arts and Healthcare program and research. Short story about one of this big study where tens of thousands of people did these surveys for us every week online. People who had a half hour a day of some kind of arts or culture, creative activity, had um, lower rates of depression, lower rates of anxiety, better more positive outlooks on life. So it actually is improving our mental health at a time when isolation and loneliness was skyrocketing. So there was a lot to it. I myself tried something new, and I took up knitting during the pandemic. I'd always wanted to, my grandmother, my aunts, they always knit. I always loved the clickety clack of the needles. I got to tell you though, you can't focus on like getting those stitches and loops and everything right, and at the same time worry and stress about the pandemic and is there an industry left for me and a job left for me on the other side of this. And in fact, it was one of my neighbors, my parents neighbors in Brookfield, who's I kind of learned on YouTube, but she was the one who really got me going on it. I'm not that good. I make the world's longest scarves, but I got to tell you, it was I was just feel very lucky to have had that. So when it was time to get out of the house again, so I'm in the DC area, and we've got lots of museums and arts and culture organizations around here. My wife and I are like, well, all right, it's safe to come out and pop our heads up again. What should we do? And we thought, museum seemed like a good, safe first bet. Now that I'm a textile artist, kidding. I mean, fiber artist. We've got a great textile museum in Washington, D.C. We had never been. It's like, well, let's go there, because I get with all my fellow knitters. And so it was like, all right, great first plan. Of course, were they open? I don't know, so we went online, we found their website, and they were open, and here were their hours and safety protocols, wear your mask, keep your distance. And we read about some of the different exhibitions they had going and a talk by a curator, and we thought, this is perfect. Click the button and pull out the credit card and bought our tickets. So we're all set to go. Um, Actually, the next day I was informed by Ginny, my wife, that we'd be dressing up for this Saturday afternoon thing. So there was some, already, we haven't even gotten out the door. There's already some retail involved in all of this, but some more dress up clothes finally, and some jewelry. So Saturday comes, we jumped in the car, we drove downtown, and we parked in a parking garage near the museum and gave the guy my $10, got my stub, and from there, we started walking, and we stopped and had lunch. Right? Isn't that something when we have some kind of culture event, we make a whole experience out of it. And so there's a wonderful restaurant downtown there. It's called Founding Farmers. And, it's really nice. It's farm to fork. Everything's grown within 50 miles. I'm seeing some heads nod here. And it's not cheap. So we had about a $70 lunch, but, it was great to be out, great to be just sort of experiencing the world again. And then it was about a half dozen block walk after that to the museum. And we got there and we got our program and it's beautiful architecture. And I got to tell you, when we got in, my first sensory experience of the afternoon in the museum wasn't 1,000-year-old tapestry. They had that amazing, or like those really incredible quilts exhibitions they had. It was the air conditioning, because this was August in Washington, D.C., and it was like, million degrees outside. And I just remember thinking like, oh my God, I've seen nothing. I already love this place. And then we spent the afternoon and we, walked the floors and saw the exhibitions and heard a talk by a curator and hit the gift shop on the way out. So just kind of pause there and roll back, to a few days earlier. Um, think of all the industries that were touched related to this one. Randy finally gets back out of the house, to have some kind of cultural experience again, after this shut down pandemic. Well, it started when we went online and we checked their website, right? We take this for granted with ourselves. We've all got websites, but that means we've got web designers and programmers and connectivity, and we pay, photographers and writers to populate that site with content. And we bought our tickets online. So now the e-commerce and finance people, they're seeing a little bit of benefit from this whole thing. And so just right out of the gate there, we're already starting to touch all these other industries in the community. We did some retail shopping the next day. And so, those businesses got a little of the action. Saturday comes, we drive downtown, and, we didn't have to drive too far, but people travel for the arts, and we're going to hear some numbers about that. But we parked in a parking garage, and that $10 I gave to the guy, that's a job. There is a company that owns and manages those parking garages. I'll tell you something else. That part of Washington, D.C., during the week, you can't get a parking spot. I mean, you gotta get to like at 5:30 in the morning, and there's already a line. But on the weekend, if it wasn't for those arts and culture organizations, that place would probably be closed because there is nothing else going on in that part of town. So, and then from there we went to Founding Farmers, and it was again, it's a restaurant, and some of those $70 that we spent is going to the growers and the producers of the food, right? Everything's within 50 miles of the restaurant, and the waiter is bringing home some personal income, the owner of the restaurant some entrepreneurial income. There's all of that economic activity. And then it was over to the museum. And you ever notice whenever you go to an arts event, we're always giving people paper, right? It's a program, it's some kind of document, or it's a flyer. Printers make bank from our culture organizations. And we're always doing like, thick stock and glossy color and all that type of thing, and thousands of units. So even just that, right? And there's a graphic artist, in the somewhere in town that's paid to do the design work on that. Um, Now, I don't know what their utility bill is to keep that place air conditioned in the summer, but I mean, it's got to be insane, right? And so that's just something else. Um, None of these, we think of this, but nobody else really thinks about all the expenses that our organizations have. Like all businesses, it's just not an intuitive way to think about the arts. People will think about maybe that, oh, these arts and culture organizations, like when they see the talk from a curator, they see some kind of performance or something like that. But the fact is, our organizations employ all kinds of industries. If you got a facility, you've got electricians and plumbers, and we have all got accountants and auditors and legal services and marketing and box office people. And so we employ a range of industries across the community. And so that's what we're after with this whole arts and economic prosperity study, looking at the economic and social impact of organizations and the event related spending by our audiences. So we'll jump into some data on this, but does that make sense? Everyone following me so far? Good. All right. We're seeing some heads nod. Excellent. All right. I'm going to dive into the sharing now. So, all right, there we are. Here we are today, right? Part of this great humanities webinar and advocacy series. And again, I'm just so happy to be part of that. So sharing your economic impact is what today's about. So this study, oops, let's see, click, there we go. So Arts and Economic Prosperity 6, it's the most comprehensive study of its kind ever conducted. 373 study regions from across all 50 states, plus Puerto Rico. And there we are, state of Connecticut. Everybody catch that? That was all me, that technical effect. We studied a number of communities in Connecticut, studied nationally, communities as small as 4,000 people, as large as 4 million people. The bottom line is if arts and culture is happening in your community, economic impact is happening there as well. All right, a couple things about this study. First, we mentioned a couple times the word nonprofit, and we really focus on nonprofit arts and culture organizations. And so those are, and so a couple things that's involved in that. So it's our museums, it's our history and heritage organizations, it's our performing organizations. But that also might include a publicly owned, like a state-owned museum or a city-owned performing arts facility, something like that. And sometimes in some communities, it's actually not an arts or culture organization at all. It's a program at a library that we're capturing, or at a social service organization, or at the community foundation. However, arts and culture is being connected to the public. We're capturing that as part of the study. What it does not include is Hollywood motion pictures, architecture firms, the design industry, which are all an important part of our cultural ecology, just not part of this study. And why is that? Well, typically, when a arts and culture organization, when the government funds the arts, sorry, when government funds arts and culture, that's going to those nonprofit arts and culture organizations. And it's an appropriate question to ask, right? What's the public's ROI on that investment? Cultural benefits, absolutely. But now we can also talk about economic benefits. So it's nonprofit. We take a very reliable approach to economic impact. We have a team of economists who advise us and everything, but we use an Implan platform to do our economic analysis. It's an online system. It's the same kind of system that more than 1,000 cities and states use to do their economic analysis. And what this enables us to do is customize economic models for every community that we study, because $50 spent in New Haven is going to have a different economic impact than 50 spent in Brookfield or Waterbury or Hartford. So very localized models. And lastly, we take a very conservative approach to economic impact. We surveyed all the arts and culture organizations we could find, working with the state, working with at the community level. Surveyed over 1,700 of them, heard back from 717 organizations, so a little less than half. And that's what we go with. We only use data from the organizations that provide it. So we don't make estimates for non-respondents. So conservative, and yet having passed through Connecticut several times, trust me, these numbers are always bigger than folks expect. So that's a little bit about what we did. All right, what did we actually find? Well, the first thing we want to look at is total economic activity. And this is again 2022, $954 million. So we are just under $1 billion of spending by nonprofit arts and culture organizations and their audiences. So you can see the figure on the left, $606 million in spending by the organizations. And again, Mythbuster, we all love our culture events, but we don't think of our organizations as businesses. But the fact is, we employ people locally, we purchase goods and services from other businesses in the community, we're members of the Chamber of Commerce, we help drive tourism. We are good business citizens. Now, no surprise, any business has an economic impact. I can send you $5 and my economist will chase you down and see what you do with it and tell you the economic impact of those $5. But few industries generate the kind of event related spending that arts and culture organizations do, right? And that was my whole Saturday afternoon out. Audience spending $348 million, and that was on 10.8 million attendees just at those 717 organizations. We know there's more out there because not everybody responded, but impressive numbers right there. So what's the economic impact of that? Well, the first thing we look at is jobs. Ask any legislator their three priorities, and there's a good chance they'll tell you jobs, jobs, and jobs. So we're going to connect our arts and culture product to that priority of theirs. Jobs, 16,667 jobs across the state as a result of that 950 plus $1 million of economic activity. Now, a little something about these jobs. Arts and culture jobs are necessarily local jobs. Ours is not an industry that's going to be sent overseas and offshored. Why? Because we need the curators in our institutions hanging the art. We need the performers on the stage. We need the, arts educators in the schools and the, arts therapists in the hospitals. Very localized jobs. Bottom line, arts and culture it's not just food for the soul. It's putting food on the table for 16,667 households right there in Connecticut. What else do we look at? Government revenue. $201 million in local, state, and federal government revenue. Again, even our most ardent arts supporters, in elected offices, it's like, of course, we're going to fund arts and humanities and culture. But they kind of see those dollars as like sort of a one-way ride out of town, and sort of disappearing down some black hole of goodness. What this shows us is no, it's an investment. Those dollars are used to support our work, but it's also returning revenue to government, and they're looking for revenue sources to pay for all the other services. So small investment, big returns. That's arts and culture. All right. Let's look at the real value added, aspect of this. And again, that's that audience spending. And so statewide, we did 6,427 audience intercept surveys in a whole range of events. This was at museums, festivals, historic homes, performances. We did a whole range of events across the communities. And by the way, and I'm going to tell you what the name of or how to find the state report, and there'll be a link for it as well. It's in the Connecticut Office of the Arts website. But I think Cindy at some later will post a link to that. But so you can see all the 717 organizations that responded and participated in the study across the state. And if you were part of this, thank you. Can't do it without you. All right. So what did we find out doing all of these audience intercept surveys? The typical attendee spent $30.47 per person per event, not including the cost of admission. $30.47, not including admission. And you could see how those dollars are spent, food and drink. There was our lunch at Founding Farmers and local transportation. That was my parking and some shopping and clothing. We did that too. So you might be looking at lodging, wow, can you still get a room for $2 a night? And would you want it if you could get it? Probably not. So not everyone's got a lodging cost. So these are averages, right? And I'll tell you, other is always fascinating. So I was doing a statewide conversation with all our colleagues up in Wisconsin not long ago. There was a farmer who paid somebody $60 to milk his cows so he could go to the theater that night. Isn't that great? People are doing what it takes, to get to our cultural organizations. Nationally, we did 224,000 audience intercept surveys. Again, $30.47, not including the cost of admission. We actually ask about the admission costs, but those dollars are going to the organizations who are then spending them. So we count it there. We don't count it here, right? If we added admission to this pie chart, we'd be double counting. So just so everyone knows, we do pay attention. All right, what else did we ask those folks? Tell us about your expenditures. We asked them for their zip code because we want to find out. And in this case, what percentage of Connecticut's attendees came from outside the state. 10% of attendees, those 10.8 million attendees were from outside the state. And do they spend differently? Yeah, absolutely they do. Look at that, $46.70. 46.70 per person per event, not including admission. That's where you see more on food, more on transportation. Some of the lodging shows up. We asked those non-local attendees one more question, which was, why are you here? We're glad you're here. Thanks for coming. Are you here on business? Are you here visiting friends and family? 80% of those attendees said, we came specifically for this arts and cultural event. So you can really see the pulling power of our work, bringing people to the community, spending money at local businesses. So 10% from outside the state, 12% of those folks had a lodging cost, and they spent an average of $176 per person per event. So, that's what our arts and culture organizations do. They bring people to the community. It's putting heads in beds and cheeks in seats and derrieres and cafe chairs, right? We are good for local businesses. All right. We asked those attendees a little bit more about their experience. We wanted just to get beyond just the dollars and cents. So we asked for social impact questions this time, and just a couple of highlights here. I just love these. So 4 out of 5 attendees said, this venue, this culture event is a pillar of our community. 88%, so almost 9 in 10 said this inspires a sense of pride or is a source of community identity. And similar percent said, I'd feel a sense of loss if this were no longer available. And then I think the last one is so interesting, 86%. It's important to me that this venue, this culture venue, this event, this experience be available for future generations. And what that tells me is that our arts and culture experiences aren't like these one-time transactional moments, but rather it's our story, right? It's who we are. It's where our community has been and where it is and where we're going. And wow, the public really gets that. And I think that's just fabulous. Great economic numbers, but also our arts and culture organizations, we're really touching people and giving them meaningful experiences. So when you download the report and you go to the back cover, you're going to see a list and logos for a bunch of national partners on the AP6 study. So I'm in Washington, D.C., the land of national organizations. And there's so many national organizations around here. There's actually a national organization for the national organizations. But you can make that work because uh, look at the kinds of partners we have on this. The U.S. Conference of Mayors. That's where all the nation's mayors go, and the National League of Cities, the National Association of Counties. It's where our elected county leaders and county managers are. International City County Managers Association, and that's where they go for their annual conventions. And maybe you're in community cultural advancement, and you've got Race Forward. The tourism people go to Destinations International. Business folks, they all get together with the conference board. All national partners on your study, because one, they too believe arts and culture a fundamental component of a healthy community, and two, they buy into the methodology and they buy into the results. Trust me, if they thought this thing was going to stink down the road, they're not going to get anywhere near it. So when you're advocating and when you're doing your state advocacy, you've got the National Conference of State Legislators here. So remember to tell them, hey, your national organization is part of this and is part of this process. And interestingly, the public gets this too. So now we're back to my those earlier social impact, those were just Connecticut, but this is my national public opinion study. No surprise, 86% of the American population says, yeah, arts and culture improves community livability, quality of life. 79% also agree, yeah, our arts and culture and our organizations are valuable to the local economy, good for local jobs, good for local businesses. So when we tell this story, it resonates with the public. Um, Let me I'm just going to mention this real quick because I want to expand just a little bit beyond arts and economic prosperity to another study that you may hear about from time to time. And so I want to contrast that and make sure you know what there's two economic impact studies that touch Connecticut. And both are great, but both are a little bit different. So with arts and economic prosperity, I was talking about our nonprofit, sector plus spending by the audiences. This one is done by the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis. It's called the Arts and Cultural Production Satellite Account. And so what they did is probably what some of you are wondering, like, yeah, well, what about the rest of our organizations and arts businesses and, and university departments and all that type of thing. So they've widened the lens to include basically every arts and culture dollar in the U.S. economy. And it's the Arts and Cultural Production Satellite Account. And in 2022, they ping arts and culture as a 1.1 trillion with a T, dollar industry in the United States. 5.2 million jobs, 4.3% of the nation's economy. Now, what's great is they zero in now to statewide versions of this as well. So right there in Connecticut in 2022, arts and culture, again, all of it, not just nonprofit, $12.8 billion industry. That is 4% of Connecticut's economy. 54,741 jobs. Is that a lot or a little? That is bigger statewide than construction, education, transportation. So when you get in there and you're talking to your state legislators and they start saying, well, I love the arts, but we got to focus on business, and I love culture and I love humanities, arts and culture is a business. It is an industry. And so you've got two ways really to talk about that now. All right, so let me start to wrap up here. We're going to move to some advocacy real quick, and then we're going to send you home with some really wonderful tools. But what you're looking at here is, let's get to a museum. A picture from Paris in 1913. Bad news at the Louvre. The Mona Lisa was stolen. It took them 2 years to get it back, and those hooks are where the Mona Lisa had been hanging. But in the 2 years the painting was missing, more people went to see where it had been hanging than saw the painting itself in the previous 14 years. It's so easy for people to take our arts and culture organizations, our artists and performers and curators, and arts educators and arts therapy people, just to take it for granted and assume it's always going to be there. We can't. And so we got a couple tools for you. One is the Arts and Economic Prosperity Calculator. And we're going to show you here in a little bit. All you need is two numbers: total expenditures and total attendance, if you have attendance in an organization, otherwise just total expenditures, and you'll be able to calculate the economic impact of your organization. The state's got a great spreadsheet set up for you. They'll show you how to do that in just a minute. If you forget, like, oh my God, where was that? Just go to page 28 in your economic impact study report. You'll see it all right there. You can do it on the back of a napkin. So you come up with your own data. And then when you're writing your grants, your proposals, you're doing your advocacy, you talk about how we transform somebody's life and the benefits we're adding to the community. Oh, yeah. And here is our economic impact as well. Just a couple things real quick, on economic impact. I'm sorry, on advocacy. There's whole libraries on how to do it and, everything. I break it down to three questions. What's the message? Who gets the message? And who delivers the message? So what's the message? We talked about all kind of messages today, right? Arts are an industry. Arts and culture supports jobs, and we're a tourism driver. We provide social impact. If we wanted to get more expansive, we could talk about health and mental health and education and community well-being. There's all of those benefits that we provide. Who gets the message? And this is where we do a little bit of our advanced research. Who are those decision makers in our environment? It could be a legislative committee, it could be a board of trustees, it could be a CEO. And what do they care about? And then just lead with that message, right? We need a quiver full of case making arrows, and that's what we're starting to fill up here. And lastly, who delivers the message? And sometimes I think this is the most important. Um, you know, when they go up to Capitol Hill, they bring me up to do member briefings and everything. I mean, they see me coming a mile away, guys cover up their wallets, ladies lock their purse in a drawer. But if I can bring a business leader, a school superintendent, and, an artist, a scholar, a military officer to talk about how arts and culture, impacts their environment and their work, totally changes the conversation. And so, who's on our board of directors? Who are our neighbors? Whose lives have we impacted? And how can we make them champions as well? And lastly, and we started with it, we're going to finish with it. The golden rule for advocacy: no numbers without a story, no stories without a number. And just like, we were saying in the beginning, right? We're all about stories. And it could be as simple as how last time we went to this museum, we spent $30.47, or how my organization, I, employ a whole range of people in arts and culture, but I've also got lawyers, accountants, and auditors, and plumbers, and electricians. And then you've got the numbers to follow that up. So everything you do to advance arts and culture is important. It's important for us as individuals. It's important for us in our communities, and you're important for doing it. So thank you for your time today and all the great advocacy that you do and will continue to do. And I'll turn it back over to Cindy.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We have been working on a template for an economic impact report, and this is not the final version, though we will share it with all of you, but if you have any feedback, please do feel free to share that. So based on the work that Randy and his team have done, we have some numbers specific to Connecticut and our arts and culture organizations, economic impact. So we have created this spreadsheet, and I'll walk you through very quickly how to use it, though we are always here to help with that. I'm going to use for now our commissions numbers just to give us an example. The America 250 Commission here in Connecticut just to give us an example of how to pull those numbers. So in this spreadsheet under total operating expenses, you will just type in what your organization's operating expenses are. And then we have total attendance to in-person events. And again, you can round that estimate. If you have specific numbers, that's great as well. And then the next sheet in this spreadsheet populates all of these numbers into a document that you can create, that you can turn into a PDF and then share. And what you are able to do is input your information here. And then do a quick insert of a picture. So we're gonna put in our logo here and a picture from a commission event here. And then add in here some mission information. And this box fits about 100 words. And then the last thing you'll have to update is your organization name on this list. And then we go file, we can save as a PDF, and my computer is slow, so I will just go ahead and share the PDF. And then you'll get out this one-page PDF that outlines how many jobs your organization has supported, the income to households, the amount spent by attendees with your annual budget and your in-person attendance, tax revenue that's been generated by your organization. And that is all just by putting in those two numbers, and then so putting in your budget, putting in your attendance, and then just updating some of the very basic information about your organization. And we're hoping that this will give everybody the opportunity to share your personal impact with your legislators in a really clean format that is easy to read. And it really just simplifies what your organization's economic impact is, and then the result on the financial benefits to the state of Connecticut and your particular community based on those numbers. So we are excited to share this out with everybody at the end of today's webinar. And then, like I said, any feedback that you have for how we can improve it, we are happy to take that as well. And now I'm gonna open it up for question and answer. If anybody has anything, feel free to either put it in the chat, raise your hands, just unmute yourself, whatever you feel comfortable with.
I'd just like to start very quickly with thanking Randy for a fantastic presentation. It's truly edifying. Every time I hear this, Randy, I think this is the second or third time. It's great. And sometimes, you know, just building in that story at the front end and sort of making sense, and then how you articulate it is so important. And I think at the end of the day, it is how we tell our stories. And I'll just say thank you to Cindy and Leanne on our staff for putting together that document. I'm really proud of you guys for that.
I put in the chat that that online calculator that turns into a designed one pager. I'm not kidding. Nobody else is doing that. We're gonna highlight this, and hopefully, you know, 500 other communities will borrow it. Let's see, Gene. I bet you're on mute, just so you know.
Thank you. Yeah, this was fascinating, and I love the tool at the end. And I'm just wondering how can we compare, not to put down anyone else, but for example, our operating budget is probably about less than $100,000 a year, on our attendance is 35,000, and that's really high. And we would like to tell our local legislators who are supporting it minimally and are talking about cutting it, that that this has this kind of impact and that it's exceptional. So is there a way that you have some kind of graphs that are showing what's normal, what's average, and that we're really doing so
Um,
well?
yeah, boy, it's such a, now there are, and depending where you are, there were a number of localized studies as well, and you can find that on the Connecticut Office of the Arts website. But uh, I think, especially if it's just local, I mean, people are going to know your story. They're going to know your organization, and it's like, wow, such a small organization, this outsized audience impact. So, what a great story to tell. If you wanted to look at how we stack up to other communities, you could go. So I've got a website. It's aep6.americansforthearts.org. And I flash it there just at the end, but I took it off. So aep6.americansforthearts.org. And I've got 1,308 pages of data tables on there. And you can find, data for every community and different state partner that were part of this study. But it's not necessarily down to an organization by organization basis. So it's more of at a community level. So there's that to consider as well. But your data in this calculator are really going to be fabulous. And something, if maybe you have any idea of what share of your audiences are from outside the community, and sometimes people tell me like, yeah, I just go and check the parking lot, and it's like, I got these license plates from 4 different states. And so even if you may not have like those specific numbers, you're going to have really good numbers. But again, you can just kind of tell that story, and it'll really register with people. Like, oh yeah, you know what? I did notice, Um,
Yeah,
so
we do some surveys, so we do get some of that information. Obviously, it's not precise, but we have an idea. But our only funding source is a small source. $10,000 comes from the town, and they're talking about cutting that 10,000.
oh yeah.
So they don't care if people are coming from out of state. They're only caring that they're supporting their own community. And this is really great because I'll be able to tell them, you are having a huge economic impact on your local community here. So
Yeah,
this would be really helpful if I can get their ear. But
and yeah, and that
we need to
third
let them know
question,
it's-
yeah, and that third question, who else can tell this story? So, maybe your local restaurateurs. I tell you, restaurateurs, I feel like they all learn the same talking point at culinary school. I don't need to check the weekend section if there's going to be a great, festival or performance or exhibition. It's cheeks and seats. I see it in my business. And so, if that $10,000 gets cut, that is going to work its way down the food chain, and it's going to bite them as well. And so that's a thought. Good luck.
Yes, thank you. No, we're also surveying the merchants and getting great impact, but having them speak for us. Thank you. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Randy, would you mind showing that screen again that has the contact info?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's see. Share. All right, there it is. So that's that website, ap6.americansforthearts.org, and that is my email. So if I turned a corner too quick or something like that, all right, so I will. Now, I'll share this with Cindy and all, and so they'll make it available to you as well. So you can use that as well.
We'll be sending out this afternoon a link to the recording, the template, and all of the links that were put in the chat. And we'll include as well a link to the spreadsheet or the PowerPoint so that you have all of that.
Okay. Thank you so much, Cindy and Randy.
Yeah, feel free to use it. Okay.
Any other questions?
I'll make another point if no one else has anything to say. Our organization is doesn't qualify as an arts organization because we do economic development. We have vendors there that are not arts, as well as many makers as we can find and lots of bands, but we have food and that's culture.
Yeah.
We have our local nonprofit organizations. And so with the arts, when we apply for arts grants, they say, no, you don't qualify. You're not an arts organization. It's like, too bad you have these silos because you're not
Oh,
helping.
wow. I mean, so it sounds like some kind of community festival. Am I
Yeah,
getting?
it's a street festival. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, in my, I mean, everyone's got different criteria and everything, and I don't know if maybe you need to invite more people to come and spend the day at the festival so they could see, like, wow, uh, if they called this something else, it would clearly look like a music festival, and so I don't know,
Right.
call me
Yeah.
anything,
Yeah.
just don't call me late to dinner. So I don't know, maybe it's a packaging question. I'm not sure. There's
Yeah.
a lot of other variables that I'm sure you've thought of, but
Just reinforcing your whole idea that there's too many silos here.
yeah. Sarah?
Yes, I just had a quick question. So a lot of the programming we do for New Hampshire Humanities is very it's locally focused. And I was just, like it'll be at the library and it's not often, they don't often bring in people from outside. They might, but I'm just wondering if you ever get pushback on the statistics. Oh, I'm worried about me getting pushback on using
Sure.
that calculator and people just questioning how I arrive at those numbers.
Yeah, so that remember the $30.47, that's an average. And
Yeah.
we did we did 6,429 audience surveys across the state. That is a ridiculously huge sample size. Um, so people may spend less at some events, and to give you my story, man, we popped $100, I think, before we ever even started driving downtown, so or before we even hit the museum. So it's a pretty conservative approach. And so that's one way to answer it. And but the fact is, even if people spend less, like an example I've used in certain conversations, when the kids were small, we go to a Saturday afternoon theater thing, a couple of Happy Meals and I'm out, right? Throwing an ice cream cone afterwards, maybe, um, Ginny and I go out, she's expecting better than the Golden Arches. So, it's going to be a more spending. So, I mean, you can sort of talk about it in that very real way, but overall, that $30.47, I mean, those are, that's just an average. Some people are going to spend more, some people are going to spend less. It's a very defendable number. Um, and if it's like a specific single event that somebody's talking about, um, I mean, if you get that kind of pushback, and it's like, well, yeah, maybe people do spend a little less at it, but these are very reliable numbers. Even if they spend less, there's still economic impact happening here.
Yeah.
Cultural
Well,
and
yeah.
economic benefits.
And there is, I think a lot of the number of programs are small, but then I think about like just last night we had our big gala celebration and I probably dropped $20,000 all in one night. And that's rippling across the state now because we use so many different vendors.
Yeah.
So
Sarah, I'll just mention, Randy's numbers were so inspiring in terms of really thinking big picture about this. But when we actually started plugging in some organizations to test this for Connecticut, it just felt a little bit off, which was really what precipitated our revisiting some of the numbers that were more specific to Connecticut that got us to the calculator that Cindy shared. So, big picture, Randy's numbers are awesome to really play with. But we wanted to really get something that made sense to the organizations we knew we would be working with and the stories we knew we needed to tell. So if that's any consolation, we would be happy to sort of, share with you the model. You know, you can take and modify the document Cindy created for your own purposes in New Hampshire numbers.
I know John's got a question here, but I just wanted to note, I dropped a link in the chat here. We're talking about AEP6 data and all the great work that Randy and his team have done. But Connecticut Humanities, in administering the Connecticut Cultural Fund over the last several years, has done a lot of data capture of our 700 plus cultural organizations in Connecticut. The link there will get you to the nonprofit cultural census data from 21, 22, and 23. We have broader population survey findings from 2022 talking about what the general Connecticut population thinks of Connecticut arts, culture, humanities organizations, and if their legislature should support them. Impact information about this funding going away, and we're about to launch at the end of this calendar year our 2024 cultural census. So look for emails from us, and would appreciate your help in filling that out so we continue to have good data to share with the legislature and to share with you all to use on your own advocacy behalf. And I know John's got a question.
Yeah, first of all, I just like to say a very impressive presentation today. And Randy, we'd like to hire you as a lobbyist. I mean, I think your enthusiasm and et cetera really works. I wanted to echo the concern that was brought up earlier about qualifying as an arts organization. We're an all volunteer nonprofit that serves older adults, and we do quite a bit to try to promote the arts and culture. But when we look at many grants, some allow us to compete, but in other cases we're just totally locked out. And I don't know, there may be a small category that could be added for general nonprofits to apply for art and culture related grants. Maybe a small pool of money that could be, because we don't mind competing, but if you don't even get a chance to get out on the field, you can't really compete. Thank you very much.
So a couple things. One of the things we actually did do is we asked each of the responding organizations about volunteerism as part of this study. And but just to give you something quantifiable there, John, the independent sector actually tracks the value of the volunteer hour down to a state level. And in 2022, it was $34.56, 3456. 34.56 is the value of the average volunteer hour. And so statewide, there's about 37,000 volunteers who gave 1.5 million hours in Connecticut. And that was about $52.8 million of value. Now, that's not part of the overall almost $1 billion figure, because there's not actually any dollars changing hands here. But there are some ways to quantify even that, since we're quantifying everything today. So I would, that's just one more way to tell, the story, because without the volunteers, this cultural and even small, but worth mentioning, economic benefit is happening. And as a reminder, we did 13 communities across the state of Connecticut, in addition to the full state study. And so you can find something maybe a little more locally. Sarah, I did want to mention, we had 6 communities in New Hampshire as part of this study as well. So, there might be some more, that's just a resource that's out there as well. So,
Thanks everyone for joining us. I think we're a little over time, so want to respect everybody's afternoon. This was great. And thanks so much, Randy.
Thanks for having me. It's great to see everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Randy.
you.
Very
Thank you
helpful,
very
helpful.
much.